another edition of Operation Gladio meets Secret Societies, and we may get to the Fabians today. Warhamster has an entire agenda for us today, and welcome to the show, Warhamster.
Thank you much. Always a pleasure. Yeah, that agenda, I thought we were going to jump right into the Fabians today, but there's a little bit more of the backstory that kind of helps us tie a whole bunch of our ongoing themes together. And I think I want to do the backstory just a little bit more. And there's some fun names we're going to get to. So,
Please squeeze in me.
You got all your Fabian notes ready to go. First thing I wanted to talk, well, first of all, where have we been? And I'll tell you where we're going. We went into the philosophical foundations of the different isms we're dealing with today, including Fabianism. And we really have two major schools of thought. One is basically the classical liberal John Lockean ideas that we're all endowed with our God-given natural rights of life, liberty, and property, and the only legitimate view purpose of a government is to preserve those rights. Anything else becomes authoritarian. And once you take that one step towards taking away some rights, the slippery slope leads us all the way to communism. And that's the true right-left divide. And it's basically, it would be Rousseau versus Locke in general. There's a bunch of the thinkers on the left. You could say Karl Marx. Charles Darwin's one we're going to talk about today. But it's really important to really juxtapose the two different positions and show you how those have evolved in history. And you're going to find that a lot of these ideas, the socialist type ideas, egalitarian and stuff like that, they're based on enough good ideas that they're able to be sold to a lot of people. To make people feel good about having those beliefs because it's for the greater good. And you're missing the fundamental truth that the greater good, you can't do that if you're going to sacrifice the individual liberty. And you know which side of that coin I fall on. So,
yep.
Liberty or death. Live free or die. So, let's go back in history a little bit. This is the 1800s, where pretty much everything we're living through today, the foundations were set. And we had just come out of the Renaissance and the rise of what we call liberal thinking. And it was there was a wonderful period of time. We talked about how England took over as the dominant economy of the globe from the Dutch for various reasons. So this period of time, England's at the height of her powers. And we get into what's called the Industrial Revolution, which is one of the most transformative periods of human history. It fundamentally shifted societies from largely agrarian to big factory-based urban dwelling. And this had impacts throughout society, not just on where people lived and how they made a living. With me so far?
Yep.
So England was the first country to experience the Industrial Revolution. There's a few reasons for that. One, they had the world's reserve currency and a lot of money, and a very powerful navy, but they also had abundant coal and iron resources. They had a commercial empire, which provided raw materials coming in from all over. Best example of that was cotton from the colonies. One of the biggest one of the industries that benefited most from the Industrial Revolution was textiles, and they needed the raw material from the Americas. So that's the cotton. England also had export markets, so if they manufactured goods, they'd have a customer. Another really important thing happened in this period of time was the agricultural revolution. Crop rotation increased food production, and it freed up the rural labor to go work for factories, which kind of really goes against Thomas Malthus said about, remember the graph? Yeah. They were living through an example of it, of increased food production, and Malthus still comes up with his brain dead ideas. England also had political stability, pretty strong property rights, and the big ones that I've always talked about, the ability to accumulate capital, not only through a banking system that was very advanced, and they also had what's called the joint stock system, which allowed for the pooling of capital for endeavors bigger than any one family could take on their own. So by 1850, England was producing over 50% of the world's iron and cotton products. So that's pretty dominant, would you say?
Yes.
The U.S. Industrial Revolution started later, right around 1790s. and it went till about 1900. You can actually say the second U.S. Industrial Revolution was 1870 to 1914. And you watch how much America changed in that second Industrial Revolution. All of these institutions we're dealing with today rose up during that time period, whether it be the Federal Reserve, income tax system, our whole university system, you name it. That's all came in during those periods, thanks to the robber barons who got filthy rich during the Industrial Revolution. Why did the U.S. do so well and become the world's biggest industrial power? Well, we had vast natural resources. There's a pretty big pipeline going across the Atlantic between the English and Americans. And we've talked a while back about what we called dollar princesses.
Mm-hmm.
So for those who don't know, a lot of these wealthy robber barons, American nobility, they had all the money in the world, but they didn't have titles. So they would ship their daughters over to England. And you had all these nobles that were getting replaced by the British mercantilists or industrialists. So you had all these lands, but no money, but they had titles. So we married our daughters off to get British titles. The academic freeway we're going to talk about as well. A lot of British ideas came over the Atlantic at the same time. And when we get into the Fabians, that absolutely happened. So as part of that, the Americans really adopted and improved the British technology in many ways. We also had massive immigration to provide cheap labor. And you've heard me say this before. Yeah, they ended slavery in America to replace it by slave labor that just got paid pennies a day in the factories and on the railroads. I think some of the slaves had it better off than the Chinese chain gangs.
Right.
You ask the Irish immigrants of that period of time, were they better off than slaves? They'd have an argument. It was not an easy life. They worked like 18-hour days, sometimes 6 days a week, back-breaking labor. Couldn't organize. If you tried to form a union, what would happen, Colonel?
It was infiltrated and the Pinkertons were called on you.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. America also had a big cultural emphasis on innovation and entrepreneurship. Think we still have that?
Yes.
It's still there. Big examples of that, things that really changed in America, was Eli Whitney's cotton gin. We talked earlier about McCormick's Reaper, Edison's electricity. Carnegie's steel production was very innovative, especially when you destroyed your competition. Ford's assembly line, and of course, Rockefeller's oil empire, great examples of American Industrial Revolution. The first three of those came in the early, and the last three of them came in the second Industrial Revolution. Why didn't France keep up? Well, they got disrupted by the French Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars that set them back by decades. Germany was a very late starter, but once they got industrialized, they did it quickly. And basically 1871 is when Otto Bismarck united a bunch of Prussian states into what is now modern-day Germany. And after that, they embraced industrialization to the point where they became absolute economic rivals of England. And I'll make the argument that might have been the major cause of World War I.
I think that's a good argument.
Go ahead.
I said, I think that's a good argument.
Okay. You can also make the case that that's one of the reasons for World War II, as the Nazis rebuilt German industry, but we're not getting there today. Japan industrialized after the 1868 Meiji Restoration. All they did is they imported Western technology. And you know how good they are at innovation. And, it was a natural benefactory. So why didn't other countries do well? Russia, China, the Ottoman Empire, India, they remained largely agrarian. They weren't anywhere near the industrial peak of the West. And there's a lot of reasons for that. They had weak institutions. They lacked capital. And there's always those countries all had a lot of political instability, a lot of turnover at the top. In the industrialized nations, this had a huge cultural transformation. Talked about urbanization, people, moving from the rural areas to cities. That changed a lot of things. Another really interesting development that was time discipline. When you're living on a farm, you got a rooster to wake you up in the morning, but you got to do your crops whenever it's time to do it. When you got to punch a time clock at the factory, you're there at 8 a.m. every single day on time, or you don't get your paycheck. And that had a big cultural shift. We also created a class system, both in England and America. England probably already had more of it, but they had a new class system. It was a rise of the wealthy industrial, what they call the bourgeoisie. Same thing happened in America. That class structure difference would fuel the ideas that would lead to socialism, Marxism, things like labor unions. Industrial revolution also gave us a ton more goods to buy and created consumerism and materialism, which was basically keep up with the Jones came later, but the consumerism came a long time ago. People had more money to spend and more things to spend it on. Industrialization led to a lot of social problems. You had child labor. You had urban slums. Talked about the Irish factory workers, or they'd come over, work for pennies a day, and they'd have to go live in slums. It's the only thing they could afford. That made for obviously some pretty big problems in the cities. We had pollution issues. We had a breakdown of the family structure. But like I said, there's some good things that comes out of all these things. It's good and bad. You have to look at a balance. A lot of reform movements came in the 1800s. Abolition of slavery, which unfortunately slavery has not been abolished, has it?
No.
You see any of the statistics about was it Libya? It's got the world's biggest slave markets.
Yes.
Why did we go over there in the first place?
Because we want their oil.
And we didn't want them to create an African gold-based monetary system, right?
And we didn't want a successful African country as a role model for the rest of them.
We also got women's rights out of the 1800s. I know some people that think repealing the 19th Amendment might make American politics a little bit more desirable. I'm not going to go there with you on this. Sorry about that. And here's another one we've talked about, but we came out of the 1800s. We got public education out of it. And this goes right back to our good buddy Horace Mann, who, of course, started one of the grooming schools that we talk about.
Yep.
So do you want to talk about Horace Mann real quick?
We did.
Yeah.
We did a whole show on the whole education thing. But I mean, he's just modeled in theory off of these same principles of the government. Basically, give your children to the government, let them educate them with our approved text, and it's just another basically brainwashing capability so they can produce useful idiots in order to be under their control.
That's perfectly said. Horace Mann brought over those ideas from Prussia. It's based on the Prussian or German education system, and it spread quickly, but it started notably in the Northeast, New England.
Yes.
Which, of course, those kids would then go on to the Ivy League schools. And then they would then go on to join the secret societies and then run our institutions like the CIA and the State Department.
Yes.
And really, I think the fundamental truth is it's loyalty to the state. The state can do no wrong. That's what is taught in our schools.
Yes.
We talked a bit about modernism, because that's the Industrial Revolution for you. A lot of forces working together, moving us towards where we got to. Some good things came out of it, some not so good. Fair enough?
Yes.
We've used the term modernism, which came in the 1800s. People had a lot more free time after the Industrial Revolution to spend on working on their social status. And this is good and bad. That's where we'll get to egalitarianism in a bit. But this is where a lot of these ideas, it has to do with a lot more leisure time and this new class of people, these, you can call them socialites, I guess. Modernism, the Industrial Revolution created a sense of constant change, speed, and disruption, which is the core experience of modernity. Traditional religious and rural worldviews eroded in favor of science, technology, and, air quotes, progress.
Right.
And these people had to see themselves as progressive. We're part of a new era. We've evolved beyond our barbaric pasts. That's the whole mindset, and we see this today. This is the birth of wokeism. This is really what is happening right here.
Yeah,
wokeism is modernism. Yeah, you had more alienation, anonymity, and fragmentation in industrial city life, and that inspired. You had the Romanticism, which are guys like Wordsworth and Blake. This is a reaction against the industrial ugliness. And what we're going to get to here is realism and naturalism, and modernism, proper modernism. These are all fish swimming on the same wave. I think that's a good way of putting it. So here's an interesting quote I got. In short, the Industrial Revolution didn't just change how goods were made, it changed how humans lived, thought, and experienced time and society. England started it, America perfected its scale.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's pretty accurate. I want to talk a little bit about egalitarianism. Okay, so the roots of egalitarianism go back to Greek and Roman days, but there's different types of egalitarianism. So let me give you a definition. It says egalitarianism is the philosophical and political doctrine that emphasizes the equality of all human beings. Slippery slope there, right? Particularly in terms of rights, dignity, opportunities, and in stronger forms, outcomes.
Yeah, leave that last part off.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have to go over it because that leads us to the Fabians.
Yes, it does.
Finishing that definition, it has been one of the most influential ideas in modern history, shaping revolutions, constitutions, social movements, and ideologies across the political spectrum. You can read about some egalitarian stuff in the Bible, Galatians 3:28. Neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female. Usually the ancients were talked about egalitarianism, it was limited to spiritual or moral equality, not political or economic.
Correct.
That comes about when we get past the Enlightenment. And of course, my boy John Locke lays the groundwork when he talks about natural rights theory, life, liberty, and property, applying to all individuals. We should have stopped right there.
Yes, we could stop right there.
Unfortunately, Jean-Jacques Rousseau came along and radicalized the notion with the idea that humans are born equal and free, but society corrupts this equality, and his concept of the general will influenced revolutionary thought because he wanted equal outcomes.
Right.
Which is why you wanted to stop. American Revolution obviously embraced egalitarian ideals in the Declaration of Independence. The French Revolution took it too far. They showed the limits. Because women and slaves and the poor were often excluded from the French political equality. And then, of course, we get the 19th and 20th centuries, Marxism and socialism. They wanted economic egalitarianism. They argued capitalism creates a class inequality. Can't have that. They called for a classless society. That is communism. It would also lead to abolitionism and civil rights. And those are good things. We do support women's suffrage. We do support abolition. And I think the civil rights movement
further the intended John Locke definition of people being equal as far as God-given rights.
Yeah, exactly. This is what you just said when I opened this up. Outcomes was the whole key. That's really the problematic word. And of course, that leads to ideas like the welfare state and social democracy, which are not good things in my opinion. Which, of course, post-World War II Europe absolutely embraced that. They developed egalitarian policies through things like high taxes, universal health care, education for all, just to reduce inequality. And how's that working out?
To try to achieve equal outcomes.
Yes, it's equity versus equality. It's
Yes.
just, and that's where we're really getting to the Locke versus Rousseau. It's so fundamentally simple, but I feel like we have to hammer it home because when we get to the Fabians, these are people that think they're doing good. They're egalitarians. We're going to slowly take over your institutions and impose our socialist paradise, utopia on you. Who cares if you don't want to? Who cares about your rights? We're going to do this because we're right. We're better than you. We're good. That's why you talk to leftists today. They don't understand that they actually think that they're good people. Unfortunately, they had to be indoctrinated to get there, and they can't actually listen to a thought that differs. And we know where the violence comes from. And obviously, you get the most radical side of egalitarianism leads to whole societal experiments, which like the Soviet Union, Maoist China, Cambodia, Khmer Rouge. How many billions of people died in those experiments? So there's several different forms of egalitarianism. You've got political egalitarianism, which is equal rights before the law, voting rights, and democratic participation. Nothing wrong with that necessarily, right? You got legal egalitarianism, equal opportunity in the law. Nobody's above the law, that kind of stuff. But that's probably good.
It doesn't work, but it's good.
Yes, because we do have people that are above the law.
Yeah.
Just not on paper. You have social egalitarianism, which is basically equality of status and dignity, trying to reduction of hierarchies. But I just think people naturally form hierarchies. Some people are more successful than others.
Correct.
You can't.
And in many cases, it's because the effort put into it.
Quite often.
Yeah.
This is the age-old question. Okay, let's say I go out and make $1 billion, and my children inherit that. They have a higher social status, and they didn't earn it. How that was to be addressed has been one of the most important questions. I don't know that we've ever gotten it right. They came up with the estate tax, and then Rockefeller decides, okay, we'll create the tax-free foundation, so we'll never have to pay the estate tax.
Yeah.
And we'll do it. We'll do it under the guise of charity.
Right.
Very egalitarian of them, wasn't it?
Yes.
Here's where it gets really bad. Economic egalitarianism. And that goes anywhere from equality of outcomes to equality of opportunity. One of the classical liberals, equality of opportunity, and equality of outcomes, obviously, is the strong socialist version.
Correct.
One good. I mean, that's really a fundamental case I'm making here. So, and of course, the bad one, another bad one he had is global egalitarianism, which is a modern theory that argues for reduced inequality between rich and poor nations.
One world government.
What's that?
One world government.
Exactly. And that's what the United Nations has been about the entire time. And who were the big backers of the United Nations?
The Rockefellers.
Yeah. And our buddies Carnegie, and we're going to get to this in more detail. I'll repeat this again, but remember the Carnegie Foundation for International Peace, in its opening mission statement, says we basically have got to eliminate the nation state. We have to have one world government. And it's right there in their mission statement.
Yeah.
So there you have it.
How Fabian of them.
Everything's leading to it. Do I want to go more about egalitarianism, or I hit that home hard enough?
I think we got it.
Okay. Well, let's jump into an entity which I think is the predecessor of the Fabian Society, known as the X Club. It has nothing to do with Elon Musk because it was way back.
Can I do a precursor to the X Club?
Please.
That I had in my notes? There was a precursor to the X Club. Was you aware of that?
There's a few different societies that were like social clubs.
This one specifically the precursor to the X Club. It's called the Lunar Society. And the Lunar Society was set up by none other than Erasmus Darwin. And who is that? Charles Darwin's grandfather. And that particular organization was described as 14 brilliant scientists, writers, and industrialists. They were called the lunatics. I'm sorry. The irony of that is so hilarious.
No, I'm glad you brought that up. I didn't have it in my notes, but it was a part of my reading, my homework. But yes, that's a great addition.
Yes.
And it makes perfect. It is an absolute precursor.
Yeah.
These are your intellectuals, the intellectual class out there, getting together over dinner and saying, wouldn't the world be better if we ran it?
Yeah, and so they're the father's father of the scientists, but they also were the industrialists. This is like the dinner club of the thing that we think about all the time, going on, like the dinner clubs that happened in the lead up to World War I and World War II that was notorious in London. And of course, this is in the UK. The industrialists of this group were responsible for building the canals, public buildings, factories, and many famous businesses. They led into the Industrial Revolution, and the whole 9 yards. So I just wanted to put that out there to let people know just how far back this goes.
Yeah, we always talk about these smoke-filled rooms, that private clubs. That's what we're talking about here.
Yes.
And of course, this whole thinking would lead us, through Fabianism into technocracy. And that's kind of, now you'd call these clubs things like the World Economic Forum or, I don't know. We had the Club of Rome, all very similar in structure.
Yeah.
The X Club is described as a private, informal dining club of 9 prominent Victorian British scientists and intellectuals founded in 1864. Why'd they call it the X Club? Because it was absolutely generic. They didn't want anyone to know what they were talking about for a while. It played a significant role in promoting, here comes, scientific naturalism, Darwinian evolution, academic liberalism, and that's not the liberal term that classical liberal that we like, and of course the professionalization of science in the late 19th century England. Some of that may be good, some might not. We're going to address all that. But again, in air quotes, it was a social dining club. It was anything but. They met in London once a month. First meeting in 1864, 8 guys showed up. By the following month, they were up to 9. They'd have the same 9 members until it would go away around 1893 because everyone had died or were getting too old to meet once a month. But it was about 30 years of influence. And they had a ton of influence over scientific thought in the 1800s. Remind me, when were the Fabians founded?
In the late 1800s.
1884, right?
Mm-hmm.
In academia?
Primarily, but obviously media and that type of thing as well.
Let's talk a little bit more about the X Club. A little more background on Victorian England. There's a period of turbulent conflict in both science and religion in the 1800s in Victorian England. And a couple of things, a couple books are published right around 1859 and 1860 to really set off pretty much a hurricane of conflicting thought. And the first one of those was 1859, when Charles Darwin publishes On the Origin of Species Through Natural Selection. I'm sure we all know about Darwin's theory of evolution, that all the species evolved through gradual change and eventually adopt new features and stuff like that. This is about as controversial as it could come, and inspired a storm of argument from the scientific establishment, the clerical naturalists, Church of England. It was considered an assault on the divinely ordered aristocratic social order. We'll get into some criticisms of Darwin here in a second. Or actually, should we do it? Let's go through this first. 1860. There's a book called Essays and Reviews. It's published by a group of quote-unquote liberal Anglicans, meaning Anglican Church. And when I say liberal, what they tried to do is they wanted to analyze the Bible like it was any other work of literature. And that's heresy. And of course, their work was absolutely backed by the X-Club members. The X-Club members were absolutely rabid supporters of Darwin. That's one of their major reasons for being. Again, they were coming to exist in 1864. We had another interesting book published in 1862 by Bishop John William Colenso. It's called The Pentateuch and the Book of Joshua Critically Examined. This heretic, he's a bishop, mind you, used math and concepts, tell me if you've heard this before, of population dynamics, especially food supply and transportation, to show that the first 5 books of the Bible were faulty and unreliable.
Okay.
So you get the sense that these people are not only just agnostic, but they're flat out atheistic.
Correct.
And when you're in a nation that was founded on Christian beliefs, and then you get a bunch of people trying to do scientists like that, trying to take you in an atheist direction, you're going to get some tension.
Yes.
And the two can't coexist forever. So that's Colenso. He was a character. 1863, you get a big rift emerge in the scientific community over race theory. You had Anthropological Society of London rejected Darwinian theory, saying that it made slavery defensible. Do you understand that argument? If it's survival of the fittest, then the fittest should be at the top of society, and by default, the people that aren't as fit, are made to be slave labor. Now, the X-Club, to their credit, sided with the Ethnological Society of London, which denounced slavery and embraced academic liberalism. So I want to get into those criticisms of Darwin. Okay, so at the time, his contemporaries in the 19th century, they said he was missing transitional fossils. The critics argued there were too few missing links in the fossil record to support gradual evolution. And Darwin himself would acknowledge that this is a weakness of his theory. Do you have a position on evolution?
Well, I'm Christian. I don't believe in it.
I'm a Christian as well. I believe in intelligent design, and I could get into that a little more. But you've got a lot of great thinkers throughout history. Most of them brilliant mathematicians. They see the mathematical perfection of the universe in things like spirals, and some of the number systems. The university is so mathematically perfect, it had to have been created by intelligent design. Yeah. And that's some of the criticism of Darwin. But again, Darwin's out there to prove that God doesn't exist. So,
right.
Another critique of him.
Let me just say this. It's critical to one world government that you don't have a God, because a God and all of God's teachings is the exact opposite of that end destination. So the severing of people from God is critical. Regardless of what kind of shit you got to make up, you have to do it, because then the government becomes the new authority in people's life. This is a critical step in order to get to their end destination.
And that end destination will always lead to technocracy and eventually to transhumanism. The idea to meld mankind with machine. That's their eternal life.
Yeah. These people are getting together to create the material that is going to be used for the next couple of 100 years to separate people from God.
Yeah, and it's not just one world government. It's any authoritarian state like this we've seen, because the state must be God.
Well, their end result is one world government. But they have to do it one country at a time in order to get the guy in charge of that country to buy into the greater organization.
Which really, it's they're working side by side with the global Islamist movement, and at one point in time, once they get rid of us, they're going to have to fight it out. And I wonder if both sides know that, because at some point in time, if we're out of the way.
Yeah, see, I don't know that I agree with that, because I think the people that were in charge prior to now of those Islamic regimes were bought into this big. I mean, that's the reason why they were in business with each other. You cannot separate in the 1980s. You cannot separate, or the 90s, or even the 2000s. You can't separate. They're in every investment together. They're in every organization together, every world government together. Now, because again, I think there's people that have been educated to be in charge of that. Now, I agree with you if you're talking about the people level, but the globalists that have been groomed to be in charge of these, they don't buy into that shit. They're part of the club.
Here's what they do have in common. They both want to end Christianity and Western values.
100%.
Yeah, that's where they're working together. That's where they've always been aligned in that. But I don't think, let's say we're off the picture, and you got the globalists and Islamists both still standing. Which one do they coexist?
Yeah, coexist? I don't think you can separate I don't think there's a such thing as a globalist Islamic person. Once you have joined that club, you check your religion at the door to be in the club. They have sold the soul of whatever their belief system was to get in the club. And there was a crap ton of them in that club. Now, I think a lot of them has been replaced over time, especially in the last 8 years. But I don't believe that once they get to, because at the end of the day, these people have no problem killing them. And so in order to get in the world government club, that they've already left their religion at the door. I don't think they're as religious zealots as the people that they're managing in order to kill the rest of the Christians. I think at this level, there's a lot of zealots, but I don't think at that level there are any.
Well, then they're dealing with, I get what you're saying, the puppet masters, the ones that are in the club, are not true believers, but they are dealing with Frankenstein's monster, because Islam is a very dangerous social movement, and the most radical aspects of it, or the interpretations of it, want to make the entire world, Islamic. It has to be you're either Muslim or you're dead. That's where they draw the line.
I understand that, and it was necessary to radicalize them in order to have this entire operation unfold the way it's unfolded. But just like with the Pol Pot and the Khmer, they have no problems killing millions of people.
No, they do not.
That's right. And they have the tools now to do that. So if they're useful idiots now, using the radical Islamic agenda, they'll just nuke them. And I'm not kidding. These people are that sadistic. They are useful idiots.
Well, they also want to reduce the population of the world by 95%, so that's one way of
Oh,
getting there.
yeah. They're useful idiots.
All right, more critiques of Darwin. This is a 19th century critique, the irreducible complexity. Opponents like St. George Jackson Mivart pointed out that complex organisms, like the eye, seemed impossible to evolve through small incremental steps. And obviously, that makes a ton of sense. Being didn't just go from blind to being able to see, through some evolutionary process. That just wouldn't happen. And that's the criticism there. Then there's also the blending inheritance problem. Before we understood Mendel's genetics, critics said useful variations would be blended away in offspring. That's perhaps not that criticism probably isn't all that strong the way we now understand genetics. Modern day criticism is the Cambrian explosion. You familiar?
No.
This is about 540 million years ago. We had a sudden appearance of a bunch of diverse animal phyla running around. This absolutely challenges the idea of slow, gradual change. It's like no life 541 million years ago, then poof, there's a whole bunch of different animals. That seems to make Darwin's theories a little bit off. But it does point to intelligent design or creationism. Another problem is the origin of life, which is known as abiogenesis. Darwin's theory explains diversification after life began, but says nothing about how life originated from non-life, a major gap. And that takes us into Big Bang theory, but we're not going that deep into science.
Yeah, I'm out.
I've been thinking about Big Bang theory stuff since I was about 10 years old and got into sci-fi. So one of these days I'll have to go on a rampage.
I just watched the show a long time ago, but yeah, I'm not there.
Another critique is irreducible complexity and specified complexity. Basically, certain biological systems like blood clotting, bacterial flagellum, they appear too interdependent to evolve stepwise. And that one actually makes sense to me. And of course, the limits of natural selection. It explains microevolution, small changes, but struggles with macroevolution, like new body parts. So, it makes sense that human beings once had a tail because we have a tailbone. And once we started walking on twos, we didn't need the tail for balance anymore because we're bipedal. That actually makes sense. But, having an elephant grow a trunk, that doesn't. I don't know if that's the best example, but that's what that critique is. Biggest critique about Darwin, he's trying to end God and justify, socialism. That's my critique.
Yeah.
Then you have the philosophical critiques, obviously, materialism and atheism. Many saw Darwin as removing purpose and design from nature, undermining traditional religious beliefs in a creator. Darwin himself lost faith gradually, partly due to his theory and personal tragedies.
Yeah, my life sucks, so I don't believe in God.
Yeah. You got the moral implications. Basically portraying humans as evolved animals removes objective morality and dignity. A lot of people object to being considered an animal. I think a lot of people are still animals. Then there's a teleological versus blind chance argument. Philosophers argued that evolution by random mutation plus natural selection could not account for apparent purpose and complexity in living things. There's a bunch of conspiracy theories out there. Oh, let's talk about this first. Well, let's talk about conspiracy theories. A lot of books out there claim that Darwin was a member of the Illuminati or Freemasons. Probably not, and the X Club does not have Masonic ties at all. Would the X Club be considered a secret society? Well, it's a limited membership. private society, but was it secret?
So technically not. I mean, because it met as a dinner club in public places, but it was not well known at the time that it was anything other than a supper club. And it also was never revealed what the manipulations behind the scenes were and how they were influencing people. So I think it's one of those gray areas where it operated an agenda that was not published, but it met in public.
You know, that's why they always just said that they were a dining club. And
Yes.
I'll get to some of their impact. You'll see that they were far more than that. But
yeah, so I think it's a gray area.
So we got to talk a little bit about social Darwinism. His ideas were twisted to justify imperialism, racism, and eugenics. Some people say they can twist his ideas to justify laissez-faire capitalism. I don't agree with that critique, because I have a different understanding of what laissez-faire capitalism is. Darwin himself opposed some of the misapplications, but his critics argue that his framework really enabled them. The eugenics connection is a big one.
Yes.
Darwin's cousin was a guy by the name of Francis Galton, and he used evolutionary theory to advocate forced sterilization and selective breeding.
Yep.
Policies we'd later see implemented by people like the technocrats and the Nazis and a few others. And then, of course,
Singer, Hillary Clinton.
There's a whole list of them. And of course, a lot of early Darwinists ranked human races hierarchically and led to racism. So that's always been a critique. But that's Darwinism for you. All right, let's get back to the X Club. Who were the members? Well, the first co-founder is a guy by the name of Thomas Henry Huxley. Who? Why does that name keep popping up, Colonel?
Because he's evil.
We'll get to him. I'm going to do a little bit more detail on Huxley at the end here, but I want to get to the other 8 first. So I'm going to give their names and what they did for a living, and you're going to notice the pretty obvious pattern. You have Huxley, who's a biologist and a comparative anatomist. The other co-founder, Joseph Dalton Hooker, was a botanist and a co-founder. A guy by the name of John Tyndall was a physicist. John Lubbock was a banker, ethnologist, and entomologist. Had to get that banker in there, didn't you?
Yep.
William Spottiswoode was a mathematician, physicist, and the Queen's printer. You had Edward Franklin, who's a chemist. George, I think it's Bisk. I wrote Busk, but it's Bisk, I believe. He's a surgeon, a zoologist.
No, it's Busk. B-U-S-K.
Okay. Okay, that's the guy I was looking for. So Busk was a surgeon, zoologist, paleontologist. Edward Franklin was a chemist. A lot of these natural sciences, right? They were the ones making the big push for natural science.
Yes.
And like I said, there's some good things that came out of natural science, but it gets warped and twisted into something that is different than the truth. Thomas Archer Hurst is a mathematician, and he's one of my favorites. And then there was Herbert Spencer, who is a philosopher and a sociologist. So a very interdisciplinary group.
Well, and just so that we foot stomp this, because it's going to be important later, the sociology type, and I'm going to lump economic theory into that, was not at this time a quote unquote science. And these are the people that transition educational thought from this theoretical world into a quote unquote science. And that is not done without an intended purpose to be able to use scientific data, which is basically made up bullshit, to pass it off as scientific to this same thought process for a normal person as biological experiments. And they're literally nothing to do with each other. But this transition happens with these people where they take this abstract theoretical garbage of society and transition it into a science so that they can use it psychologically to manipulate us. And they do it the same exact thing with the discipline of economics.
Yes, and I had to live through 4 years of studying the social sciences in college and got kicked out of a lot of lectures for arguing.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, there was a French version that was very similar to the X Club called the Society of Hercule. That was in France. But we also had one in America called the Scientific Lazzaroni, which is a hilarious name. I won't get into that. It's a long story, but it was that was very active in lead up to the Civil War. And what they wanted to do was to centralize American scientific efforts. They were not successful. Okay, so how successful was this X Club in basically centralizing British science and changing it? Well, you got something called the Royal Society of London for Improving Natural Knowledge, also known as the Royal Society.
Yes.
That was founded by King Charles II in 1660, and it is the oldest continuously existing scientific academy in the world. It's kind of a big deal, right?
Yes.
Well, the X Club members got their fingerprints all over the Royal Academy. From 1870 to 78, Hooker, Spottiswoode, and Huxley all held office simultaneously in the Royal Society. From 1873 to 1885, they held the presidency, one a member or another, with the president of the Royal Society through 1885. What year were the Fabians founded? 1884. There's a connection.
So I have Franklin and Hearst on there too as part of the Royal Society.
Yeah, they were different. Huxley was a senior secretary, and Franklin and Hearst held the office of Foreign Secretary. So, which is a different office. So, yeah, which means that they could reach Foreign Secretary. That means they reach out to other nations and other scientists, which means they're jumping across the pond to influence America's universities. How nice of them.
Yes.
So I said Hearst is one of my favorite. You go deep enough into academia and the mathematical side, Hearst's name pops up a lot in the 1880s and 90s. It's not our subject at all, so I'm not going to go off on that rabbit trail. But that's why I said he's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
All right. More influence of this X Club. Hearst was the president of the London Mathematical Society between 1872 and 74. Busk was the examiner and president of the Royal College of Surgeons. Franklin was the president of the Chemical Society from 1871 to 73. Is there any aspect of science in Britain that these guys are not completely directing?
No.
No, there really isn't. Which means academia, which is where the Fabians first started their infiltration.
Yes.
You know what's great about these scientists? They love to give each other awards named after, I don't know, there's some lord or other scientist. So we've got to think we get any medals from this group?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Don't ask me what each of these medals mean because I didn't want to look it up. But we've got 3 Copley medalists, 5 Royal medalists, 2 Darwin medalists, 1 Rumford medalist, a Lyell medalist, a Wollaston medalist. Among the 9, they've received 18 honorary degrees, which is where you get a piece of paper that says you're an honorary doctor of something for a school you never attended.
Can I give you a quote?
Sure.
This is what was written about them. Its members were engaged in developing and propagating naturalistic accounts of physical and human phenomena. They opposed all suggestions that there were supernatural interventions in the natural order and any attempt to constrain scientific investigations with theological determined boundaries.
naturalists. And that's not to say they're all of their work was not necessarily bad, but it's what it leads to. And the reason we're saying this background is what it leads to and what their line of thinking was and what it led away from. All right. One of the X-Men, we'll call them from now on, got a Prussian Order of Merit, so Germany. 2 of them got knighthoods. We had 1 Justice of the Peace, which means a lot more in England than it does here, and, of course, 1 Privy Councillor. What's a Privy Councillor, Colonel?
Oh, you tell them. It's funny because so many of these people are part of that. It's like isn't that the City of London, like permanent body?
The Privy Council, it's kind of its own entity, be similar to the Council of Foreign Relations, but basically directly advises on foreign affairs. So let's talk about Huxley a little bit more because he's important.
And I point one more thing out about these people? So based on all of those jobs that you just outlined, they're basically all working for the government. Those were not independent things that they're in charge of. They were sanctioned through the government. And that's critical to the rest of the story.
Okay, Thomas Henry Huxley, born 1825, died in 1895, lived 70 years. He is famous for an 1860 Oxford evolution debate versus Samuel Wilberforce. I didn't want to bring out all the quotes from that debate because it was very long, but just there's a reason Huxley got the nickname is Darwin's Bulldog. Arf, arf. And that was a big part of what they were promoting, was Darwinism. That was a big reason for being of the X Club. He was born in a place called Middlesex County. He has a long list of academic positions I won't bore you with, including one called the American Philosophical Society. So Huxley was sitting on a society over here in America. And he's also going to be, the name's going to come up again because he had descendants, 3 of them, which we'll need to talk about. One is Sir Julian Huxley, and he was the first director of UNESCO.
Yes.
Colonel, you want to tell him why that's funny?
Because UNESCO comes up in all of our conversations about the World Wildlife Fund. It's basically the official UN version of that. And they're in the education, they're in almost every aspect. And more importantly, from my research, UNESCO has a really weird way of going around after the World Wildlife Fund accesses a natural resource in like the Serengeti in these countries and turns them into preserves, designating them as UNESCO heritage sites. But what we find when we dig into them is they actually have terrorist training camps on them. There's arms being ran through them. Oh, and by the way, this brings money to the table that are siphoned out of our taxpayer dollars. And they set up things like the one, what was his name? His last name's Khan the Fourth. He is very famous. He's a billionaire. He's very famous for going around and setting up these ecological friendly hotels to give them safari access. And they're supposedly in these pristine preserved areas, but they set up either dams. Now, all of the indigenous people had to leave because they weren't allowed to set up their own dams to supply their own electricity. But then 10 years later, there will be a dam there for one of their ecologically friendly hotels. So they're using all of these UNESCO sites in order to make themselves rich, but they use the designation of the World Wildlife Fund as a preservation to get all the indigenous people out. And one was so bold that when you fly into their nature preserve in your big private aircraft, and you stay at this ecological friendly hotel that has this dam that destroyed all of the wildlife downstream, they actually will put you on a bus and take you to the new lean-tos that they set up for all the indigenous people that they only allow back in the forest once a year to get medicinal plants, and have them dance for the people. And I'm not kidding.
No, and it's that whole egalitarian mindset of these people, because they call themselves conservationists, and
Yes.
that's one of the most dangerous words in human history.
Yes.
What they're trying to conserve is their own private little backyards.
Yes.
And these are the same people, once again, that want 95% of us dead. So
yes.
I'm going to vote no on that. So that's
Yes.
Sir Julian Huxley.
Yes.
And he's the first director of UNESCO. We also have an Aldous Huxley, the author of Brave New World. I'm not going to go into that today, but we are going to talk about what Brave New World was suggesting, because it was a prescription for the future.
Yes.
And a lot of 20th century Fabians, Aldous Huxley is one of their, that is almost on their Mount Rushmore, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
There was another Huxley that, not really part of our story, but interesting. Sir Andrew Huxley, so again, British knight, won the Nobel Prize in Physiology in 1963, and is the second Huxley to be the president of the Royal Society. One little post note on the Huxley family: there is a long and storied history of mental problems in that family.
Very unstable.
Yeah. That should not come as a shock once you get to know these people better, which we will.
Well, I'll have to send you this hereditary chart that I found. They actually married each other's like cousins. So
lovely.
Yeah.
So just to wrap up the X Club, you can see why we wanted to talk about them today. They really were the precursor to what we're going to talk about next week. I promise. The Fabian Socialists.
I don't believe you anymore.
Their influence and legacy. They was basically, you can think about them as a Victorian think tank disguised as a gentleman's dinner group. What do we know about think tanks?
They're evil.
Quite often they are, but they are far too influential. And you see the people that rotate in and out of government to think tanks back and forth. And it's really just and of course, they're the beneficiary of all kinds of government these days, government contracts and stuff like that. So it can also be a giant slush fund, but it's a way of impacting policy. And some of the think tanks today are incredibly influential. We've gone over many of them, how they impact foreign relations. But I mean, where do we start with the think tanks? They're dangerous. Well, this one was just as dangerous, but it was back in the Victorian era.
So I read an article on them that said, this is a quote: "The prime aim of the X Club was unconstrained academic progress." Unconstrained academic progress. And what I find very interesting time-wise is notice that its demise is simultaneously with the creation of the Fabian Society. So it's like handing off the baton.
Definitely ideologically, without a doubt.
Yeah.
They did help found the journal Nature. And when you hear me start going off on my climate hoax rants, I've got about 1,000 quotes from Nature where the things they got dead wrong. We'll get to that in our series at some point. And you think of, when I start ranting on climate change, it's probably my best rant. So that's something to look forward to, because I will get heat.
It goes back to this whole disconnecting of this hold on the science and the academic part of this is basically disengaged from reality. And there's no better example than climate, because it's completely disengaged from reality of basic facts. But because they're able to put it under and basically give birth to it under this smoke and mirror science is, the holy grail piece of this. And I hope everybody understands what we outlined today is taking these elite scientists, grouping them and polymaths, because that's another really interesting thread. You saw several of them in here. Those are the people like the Sandbank and Freeds at MIT and the Broward brothers that come out later on. They're identifying this scientific or science cabal type thing that is disengaged from reality, almost like a easy bake oven, and they can make anything come out of it.
Yeah, it's the preconceived notion. And of course, this leads into one of the things we first talked about was then we started doing the peer-reviewed journals and Robert Maxwell, and it basically had a monopoly on the peer-reviewed process completely. So, you control the funding and the basically feedback of every science, you're going to control the outcome. And more importantly, what does get published, and more importantly, what doesn't.
Yes.
So, it all starts from groups like this. And
yes.
They may live and they may live for a while, die off, but their heirs are ideologically the same, and it's
and understand that they were in the positions of control of all of that. These aren't people that just joined a dinner club in their middle management. They're the leaders of this.
And as we keep talking about, this whole egalitarian mindset is basically the predecessor of what our problem with the woke culture today. Why do you think our universities are turning into factories to brainwash our children? It's exactly that reason. You just look right up to the top and you follow the money.
Yeah.
So, and we can thank the X Club for being a big part of that. Really, I think what we showed today is that this X Club is really the key network in the rise of what's called scientific naturalism and secularism in British intellectual life. But they did much more than that. That's how they would summarize themselves, but you can see where it's leading.
Unconstrained academic progress.
And I'm all for the sciences.
This has nothing to do with science. Unconstrained academic progress. That is going to be a motto going forward, because that describes the Fabians. It describes all of them. Unconstrained academic progress. It means it's not constrained by reality. It's not constrained by anything. They can put it in, shake it up, and it's going to spit out whatever they want.
Doesn't sound like the people I want to give the keys to the kingdom to, because it's the opposite of science. Science is not science is I come up with an experiment, I report to you the results, and then you've got to be able to reproduce it. If that's the case, that is a scientific leap forward. That's not what they're doing.
No, it's going into an experiment with a hypothesis that you have no idea whether it's true or not. They do this exactly the opposite. They have an outcome they're going to back into science.
Well, that's kind of that goes straight back to Darwin, because he set out trying to prove that God didn't exist.
Yes.
That was his mission. So.
Yes. I think we just put a explanation point on the whole lesson.
I can end there. That was good. That was really good.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks for joining us today. And I'm talking about Fabians next Friday. I don't care what Warhamster's talking about. I'm just teasing.
I got 30 pages of notes waiting for you.
Okay. I have the book.
I've got the digital one right here. we can follow along on my screen.
Yeah. We're gonna
Did you get through the book already?
No. I'm about halfway through. I'm past the UK portion and the US portion. But
so I think what we'll do, I think the way to do this is I'll kind of lay out just the foundation and the people at the first part of the show on Friday, and then we just jump into the book and go back and forth on what the general ideas are.
Because we're going to do several sessions on the Fabians, because there's a few people that deserve more discussion, but mainly the theory part of it, just so that you can understand how it unfolded in the UK and then how it unfolded in the United States. So you can basically tell philosophically when you're talking to a Fabian if you understand what it was their agenda was. And I have a couple of the Fabian tracts that I bought online that I'll read a couple of things from because it's fascinating. They just lay it all out.
They got to tell you what they're going to do before they do it, right?
Yes, they do, and they're very prolific at reading. Very, they write everything down. So,
sort of like the deal with the devil, right?
Yeah, they're like they're the modern day the modern day think tanks. Obviously, modeled themselves off of the Fabians. They write something down and then it happens. Yeah, especially people like PNAC and all of them.
Everybody, thanks for watching. A lot of good comments in chat today. Thank you.
See you guys later.
Cheers.